Hello and welcome to Credit Versio's Q&A Wednesday live for September 15th. I am your host, David Michalek. I'm a consumer credit expert with 9 years experience. Actually, 9 years this month is when I got into the credit repair business as a client, and then that began my education, and that's where I started to focus on credit repair and credit education. And I've personally conducted over 10,000 one-on-one credit consultations to help people improve their credit report and scores. And on these lives, I'm looking forward to sharing with you what I've learned over those years. And we do this Facebook and YouTube live every Wednesday on both Facebook and YouTube at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So thank you so much for joining me today. Please introduce yourself. We got a handful of people watching today. It's funny how it always picks up about 15, 20 minutes into the live and we really get going. So please introduce yourself. Let me know if this is your first time joining me. If it is, welcome. Glad you're here. And just like every time we do a live, I always start off by saying this, and it can't be said too many times, and that is that our credit report and scores play a huge role in so many areas of our life. Everybody is looking at our credit report, from insurance companies, landlords, mortgage brokers, banks. Even 70% of employers are looking at our credit report to get an indication of how we honor our obligations. And that's why today having great credit is mandatory, because credit reports have evolved into something far more than just a credit report. They have become adult report cards. They have become reputation reports. And they tell the story of what we do when we are entrusted with credit. And that is one of the big reasons why we do these live Q&A calls or Q&A sessions. So during today's broadcast, feel free to post your questions about credit reports, credit scores, the repair process. If you got questions about how Credit Versio works, that is what I'm here for, and I'm happy to answer those questions. Okay, let's start out. Johnson the Queen, one of our regulars, welcome back. Good afternoon to you as well. Let's get to your question, and then I'm going to talk about an incredibly exciting update to Credit Versio. It is probably the biggest thing that we've had happen to the software since we launched in March of 2020. Joseph, welcome. First time watching live. Wasn't aware of them before. Had Credit Versio for 5 months. Wow. Well, it's I don't think we've been doing lives for 5 months, Joseph. I think it's been closer to probably 3 or 4. And now we routinely send out an email to everybody who's newly subscribed to Credit Versio, meaning last Wednesday to this Wednesday, we'll send an invitation, but I'm glad you're here. Johnson the Queen, first question: can I remove a closed and paid auto loan with late payments? The rule of thumb is this: anytime you ask the question, can this account be removed? The answer is, it depends. And that's a very common answer to a lot of credit repair, credit score question. It depends. There's a lot of variables that are involved. As far as removal goes, if you want to target just the late payments, nothing wrong with that. The dispute process, when you have Credit Versio, I'm assuming that you do. If you don't, this is the way you would do it if you wanted to do it on your own, is dispute the late payment history. And a dispute is really simple. You can say something like, hey, I'm not exactly sure that I was late at the times that are being depicted on the credit report. Can you please send me documentation? Well, what happens a lot of times, depending on how old the account is, creditors by law are obligated to reply to these disputes. That's straight out of the Fair Credit Reporting Act of 1970. And depending on what the question is, not how the question's phrased, it almost really doesn't matter what you say in a dispute letter. There's no such thing as magical language or special techniques that are going to make an account that's not in violation of the law or unverifiable, or rather verifiable, to make it in violation of the law or unverifiable. So a simple dispute: hey, I don't remember that these late payments being presented on the dates that you're presenting them. Can you please send me some documentation? The burden of proof, the burden of performance is on the creditor, aka data furnisher. And sometimes they don't have the data. Maybe they've archived it. Maybe they just don't really want to answer it. So there's a lot of variables involved. But again, the rule of thumb is, swinging back around, is account can be removed from a credit report if it's erroneous. This is out of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Erroneous, outdated, incomplete, unverifiable. Unverifiable tends to be the big one. It means that the data furnisher compelled by the law, sometimes will make the decision for whatever reason to not respond. Maybe they can't, but they know they have to, and the instructions they'll give to the credit bureau is to remove the account. Now, Johnson, you don't want to remove the paid auto loan because that's a good, solid account. You just really want to dispute the late payment history if you believe that they're inaccurate, or you just want to shoot your shot. And Credit Versio will guide you through that process. Okay, fantastic question. So what I'm going to do is, and again, if you've got questions during this live, feel free to post them. I'll be more than happy to answer them for you. But what I want to talk to you about right now is, welcome, Keith. Excellent. Congratulations. Glad you're signing up online. There we go. Perfect. Thank you. You're very welcome, Johnson. Joseph, let's get to your question. Looks like I'm going to get more questions before I get to talking about the new UI update. Okay, Credit Versio worked very well for me with Experian and TransUnion, but Equifax didn't delete as many accounts as and Equifax simply reduced all my collection. Whoop, hold on a second here. Simply reduce all my collection accounts back to the original balance, taking off collection companies. Taking collection companies interested they added. Okay, I'm not sure exactly what you're saying there. So Joseph, the dispute process is pretty straightforward. The bureaus, all three bureaus are separate companies. They have sometimes different data. They certainly use different models of both FICO and Vantage, slightly different models. That's why you're never going to see the scores the same. And what we know for sure, because we have members or we have partners that work with us that have worked for the bureaus very intimately. Two gentlemen specifically, one worked at TransUnion for 25 years in dispute resolution, and the other one worked at Equifax. So we have a really good idea of what goes on in the dispute process at the bureau level. And they have their own method of completing investigations. Sometimes you'll knock it out of the park with TransUnion because their investigation process is different. Same thing with Equifax and Experian. They do things differently. Now, one thing that Credit Versio is going to do, and Joseph, if you haven't done a dispute lately, this is something you're going to see. One of the disputes that the AI is going to see is that when you dispute an account and it's removed from maybe one bureau but not the other two, or maybe two bureaus and not one. In this case, I believe it was Equifax that's being a little stubborn. Credit Versio will present a dispute saying, hey, I disputed this account and it's been deleted from TransUnion and Experian, but you guys haven't deleted it. Can you explain why? Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to see that and go, oh, wow, our bad, we should have deleted this. But it might be a compelling dispute to get Equifax to do another reinvestigation. So, Joseph, let me just read this second part through. Reduce all my collection accounts back to the original balance. Yeah, so when you do a dispute, I'm not sure what you mean by original balance. The information on the credit report has to be accurate. It's not gonna re-age the account. That's just not something that happens. The age of the account is actually hard coded in the Metro 2. It's in the code. Now you and I can't see that, but software can see that. Okay, so hopefully that answered your question. Deshaun, welcome. Glad you're here. Keith, you're very welcome. Manswell, good to see you again. Thank you for joining us. All right, let's see. So TransUnion Experian removed like 25 accounts. That's solid. That's 25 accounts you don't have to contend with anymore from collection agencies. Equifax didn't remove any of those accounts. They just lowered the balances back to original balance. Okay. So Joseph, there's no provision in the law, in the Fair Credit Reporting Act, in the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, for an account that is reporting accurately to be removed sooner than the 7 years. Now, for whatever reason, Equifax may have looked at the dispute. They may have been in communication with that collection company and could have been satisfied that the verification that the collection company provided to Equifax was reasonable. And if that's the case, then you're not going to see a lot of movement in those accounts, which is admittedly very, very weird. It's kind of a crazy thing. Why would TransUnion and Experian be okay with removing these accounts, but Equifax is holding on to them. Now, if the information that's being reported is wrong, I mean, if it's accounts you don't recognize, it's clearly not yours, and they're still not moving it, then that's a violation of the law. And there's a handful of attorneys out there that would be more than happy on a pro bono basis, no cost out of pocket, to handle that for you. We know a ton of them, so if that's something, if you really have a problem on that credit report, these accounts are not reporting correctly, and you know that they're not, despite the fact that you've done maybe 4 or 5 disputes, send us an email, let us know what's going on, support@creditversio.com, and we'll send you to a couple of attorneys that we like to handle this stuff. And by the way, this is not uncommon. Okay, this is not uncommon at all. Mistakes occur on credit reports all the time. So you might have something like that going on. Okay, and finishing up with your question, they added interest to the medical collections. Well, yeah, I mean, that's going to happen. It doesn't mean they're going to get it. I think in some situations they're not supposed to do that. But I mean, these are collection companies. Okay, they're going to try to get as much as they possibly can, and a dispute is really the best way to start off with your interaction with them. Now, another thing too you might consider, if you owe the money, if the debt is valid and you've done your best to get the accounts deleted, then nothing wrong with swinging back around and trying to settle that debt with them. I mean, like I said, if this is money that truly you owe, I'm not saying pay it in full, but if you want to reach out to them and try to settle for maybe 20 cents on the dollar or less, give it a shot and maybe ask them to delete the account in exchange for payment. They're not supposed to do that. In fact, they're heavily admonished by the CDIA, which is the people that write the guidelines for how to report, to not do things like that. But, it happens all the time. We see it happen all the time. So give it a shot. Now, if they won't delete it upon payment, settle it anyway if you can. If it's within your budget, if it's good timing for you. The great thing about settling debt is it ends that adversarial relationship. It ends the phone calls and emails or letters in the mail if you're getting them. It also eliminates the possibility that they might sue you. Okay, a collection company is, if it's in their wheelhouse, if it's what they do, and there's a handful of collection companies out there that will file lawsuits, it ends that possibility as well. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just letting you know that they own the debt. It's an asset to them, and if they do a skip trace on you, and what that means is they're looking at your credit report. If they see that you've got a car loan for $700 a month and you've got room on your credit card, they can look at your credit report and go, you know what? Looks like Joseph has got some scratch. Maybe we should file a lawsuit against him. Okay, it happens, but you settle it, eliminate that possibility, and then what you can do is swing back around. Let's just say they don't delete that collection. Swing back around and send them a dispute. What happens, not all the time, and so don't hold me to this, but I've been doing this a long, long time. Thousands and thousands of clients, millions of disputes, and one of the things that is not uncommon that we see is after you settle a debt, send them another dispute. And when they get that dispute, they're like, we're not going to spend time, energy, and money performing what's called a reasonable investigation under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. If there's nothing in it for them, there's no money in it for them anymore, they might just hit the delete button and you've settled the debt and the account is off the credit report. And sometimes it works out that way and it can really help. Okay, Emanswell. Joseph, hope that answered your question. If you've got more detail on that, or if you want to know something else, just post and I'll get it answered for you. Emanswell, the same here, David. Some of my accounts were deleted from one bureau, not another. Thanks for the explanation. You're very welcome. Yeah, I mean, I understand. We have a very funky credit reporting system in the United States. We have 3 companies, well, the big 3. There's a lot more than 3 credit bureaus, but pretty much everybody's aware of the big 3, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. And they're separate companies. And I think 2 of them are publicly traded. One of them is not even an American company. Experian's based in Dublin. I think it's an English company or Irish company. I think their main office is in England. I could be wrong on that. But they're not an American company. So we've got 3 different companies that store our data, and there's no law that says that any creditor has to report to all 3 of them, which is why you see a lot of times, especially if you've got an older or bigger credit report, you'll see a big disparity in data and scores across all three bureaus because they're three totally different companies. Okay, let's get to Mary Angel. Oh, almost off. Greetings from Arizona. Welcome back. Good to see you again. Mary Angel, I believe you were on last week, if I'm not mistaken. Paid off a $43,000 second mortgage. It was a balloon payment due on August 1st. Now my scores on all three bureaus dropped 30 points. Why so much? They were in the low sevens before. So Mary, one of the terms that I want you to take with you today is called score migration. Score migration is the normal up and down movement of scores, even if you do nothing. Normal score migration is about 25 points. 30 points is fine too. So if I were to open up my Experian app on my phone, and if I were to graph or look at the graph of my scores over the last, I don't know how many years it goes back, because I've had my app for a long time, but let's say I just go back this year. So I go back 9 months. My score's going to go up and down 15, 30, 50 points, 20 points. A lot of it has to do with credit card utilization. But even if you do nothing, consider that a credit report has a tremendous amount of data. I mean, if you have people who have mortgages, I mean, you have to have good credit to get a mortgage for the most part, and especially if you paid off a second mortgage for 43 grand. Okay, so Mary, you're probably one of those people that has a pretty thick credit file, probably pretty old. Correct me if I'm wrong. Now, if you have that, you've got a lot of data on there that is, at the very least, aging every single month. If you have credit card balances, even if they move slightly, those are going to move your scores. Now, when you see a score movement of 80, 100 points, okay, that's an indication that something material has changed on your credit report. Something very significant has changed. 25, 35 points, even 40 points is not something that I would ever stress over. You might bounce right back up the next month. I mean, there's a lot of variables that go into scoring. So again, score migration. Look at, if you've been subscribing to a credit monitoring service, maybe you've had, I don't know, Smart Credit, Identity IQ, whatever it is that you've got that's connected to Credit Versio, go back and graph it. And I think what you're going to see is just up and down, month after month, up and down, like a little ping pong ball. And that's perfectly normal. Nothing to get excited about. Okay. So let's see. Now I got a moment where a question has not come in. One thing I want to talk to you about, for those of you who are using Credit Versio, if you're not, this will be exciting news for you as well. So right now marks a very notable time in history. This is the time where software has exceeded the ability of people to find errors to do credit repair. Now, what makes Credit Versio superior to either going it alone, and what I mean by that is just doing your own, pulling your own credit report and going through it line by line and trying to find accounts that you might want to dispute, versus say maybe hiring a credit repair company, is there's an inherent problem with that. Now, I'm gonna guess that everybody here on the call has looked at their credit report. Generally speaking, it's a PDF, and depending on how long you've had credit, this could be a 30, 40, 50 page document. You could have dozens and dozens of credit items and then multiply that by 3 bureaus. So if you're looking at a credit report, a line at a time or an account at a time and going down, it's very, very hard, even for somebody who like myself is trained at reading credit reports. So one of the things that's all I did for about 7.5 years before I came to Credit Versio, was I spent hours and hours every single day looking at credit reports, comparing them side by side, looking to see what changed. My company that I worked at before, which is a very big, very successful full-service credit repair company, I had a dispute processing team of about 25 people or so, and that's all they did, 8 hours a day, was look at credit reports to see what changed from one month to the next. That's how we determine what got deleted. This month credit report right here, last month credit report here, and just kind of scrolling through them one by one. This might sound crazy to you, and really it is. But even the biggest, most successful credit repair companies in the United States do it that way. They all have manual processing, people reading credit reports. That's a big problem because we're talking about big data files. How are you going to scan through 40, 50 accounts that span years to find some kind of an error to argue, and then have to look at the credit report the next month to see if something changed? That is a really, really big challenge. And it's a challenge that credit repair has had since credit repair existed, probably sometime in the 60s or 70s. What Credit Versio is doing now is, because it doesn't get a PDF report, and I know that people watching probably already know this. Credit Versio does not get a PDF report. It doesn't even get HTML code. It gets a big fat digital file called JSON. And that's why we only have a handful of partners we can link with, because we need a big code. And the great thing about that kind of code is it contains more information than what you and I see. So there's redacted information on credit reports that like, if you ever looked at your credit report and you're trying to find your account numbers, it's the first few digits and then XXXXX. Well, Credit Versio doesn't get that kind of report. It gets a full data, full account report. So it's able to track every single account and compare every account across all three bureaus, and then go back in time to see changes. So it's remarkable what has taken place with Credit Versio just in the last year, and I'm going to show you a little sample of how it works. Okay, so before I fall behind, let me answer a couple questions here. Donald, welcome. I paid off 3 collections, but even after I paid them off, those collections still in my credit report. So what can I do to remove them from my report? So Donald, really important to understand what a credit report is. A credit report isn't an inventory of what you owe right now. It's not what you're doing today. A credit report is a chronology of everything that you've done. Credit reports exist so that lenders, decision makers who want to determine what kind of risk you are, can look at it and see what you've done over years to determine and guess what you're likely to do in the future. It's great that you paid off your collections. Well done. But they're not coming off because you paid them. Potential creditors, lenders, employers, whoever's looking at your credit report, even though you made good on that debt, they want to know that, oh, wow, at some point, Donald defaulted on his agreement. We need to take that in consideration when we decide whether or not we want to do business with Donald, or if we extend credit to him, what that interest rate is going to be. Now, having said that, it was important for me to explain that to you, Donald, so that you understand that's what a credit report is for. Just because you pay something doesn't mean it's coming off. Okay, now, what's next? Send them a dispute. Maybe you missed a second ago, I was talking to, I believe it was Joseph, could be wrong. The advice that I was giving is, when you pay off a collection, which is a great thing to do, if you owe the money, pay it. Settle it for less if you can, but pay it. Now swing back and dispute the account. Now, they understand what you're doing. Credit Versio is going to see that collection. It understands it's a collection. Credit Versio is very familiar with how to dispute based off of what's called the FDCPA. That's a Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. That's a very specific kind of dispute. And it's going to build that dispute automatically for you. A lot of times what happens is that collection company gets that dispute and they're like, huh? This guy paid us. Why? Donald paid us already. Oh, I know what he wants to do. He wants us to delete this. Now, a lot of times collection companies will delete it, not out of the kindness of their heart. They'll delete it because by law, they are obliged to respond to it. They have to do what's called a reasonable investigation, and they have to reply to the Bureau. So 2 things might happen. The collection company might just go, oh yeah, we don't want to deal with this. There's no money in this for us at all. We're going to hit the delete button because that's easy. Or they might not respond at all, and the Bureau might remove it for non-response. It's one of the reasons why you want to do Bureau disputes. You are recruiting the credit bureaus as your ally. So credit bureaus aren't enemies. Okay, so listen, my friends, they are not enemies. They want to get the information right. They are on your side. It's important that they get accurate information from the data furnisher. So if you dispute a collection company does not respond, they are technically in violation, and the Bureau, who is ultimately culpable for that data. So if somebody's breaking the law, the data furnisher, in this case a collection company, breaks the law, the Bureau can get sued for it. Okay, so, and they don't want that, so they might delete it. Okay, let's see. Donald, hope that answers your question. If you want more detail, just let me know. Manswell, hey David, I looked into Amazon secured card. They have a fixed 10% APR. Would you recommend store secured cards? Why or why not? Personally, it doesn't matter. I do have an Amazon card. It's not a secured card, but I do have an Amazon card. I use it because for only one reason. It's 5% reward. That's it. Please do not look at APRs. It doesn't matter what the APR is because you do not carry a balance. Do not buy anything that you can't afford to pay right off. So interest rates shouldn't balance. Now, I get it. That's sometimes easier said than done. But APRs on credit cards are always going to suck. Okay, it's the worst kind of loan to have. The good news is it is interest optional. Credit cards are interest optional, meaning that if you pay it before that due date or the end of, I think it's the due date actually, then there's no interest. So make sure you pay these off in full. It really doesn't matter what kind of revolving card you have. As long as you have a couple of revolving accounts, that's going to help you a lot. I'm not a big fan of store cards if I had my choice, because usually the limits are pretty small and they're good only for that one thing. I use pretty much just one card for everything. I'll use my Amazon card for Amazon purchases because they've got a good 5%, which beats the other two cards that I have, my Discover card and my Capital One Venture card. But I pretty much put everything on my Capital One Venture card, and as much as I can, I'll pay it off every month. Okay. Rick, it only works with Identity IQ. Rick, I'm not sure what you mean. Right now, Credit Versio is compatible with Smart Credit, two of their products, and Identity IQ. And also, we are right now talking to several other companies. So maybe the next 2 months, we should have 6, 7, 8 other 3-bureau monitoring companies that will also be Credit Versio compatible. It's a lot of work to make a 3-bureau credit report compatible to Credit Versio. They have to match all the fields. We have to do a tremendous amount of testing. It's not just, hey, how come you guys aren't compatible with Experian.com? Well, will they partner? Do they have a JSON export, which most of the time they don't? Are they willing to work with us? So there's a lot to it. Okay, next question. Karita Adams. I have late payments showing from 2019 and early 2020. Since then, I've made every payment on time. Why does it reflect so heavily on my report still? How can I get them off? So, Karita, there's a couple answers to this question. Most of the negative impact you're going to experience from any derogatory information is going to last usually about 24 months until you really start recouping. It also depends on how good is your other credit. If your other credit is solid and it's able to lift the damage from the late payments on that one account, then sometimes you'll make a faster recovery. I don't really understand what you mean by reflect so heavily on your credit report still. Well, what are we talking about? What are the other factors? Are we talking about a 50-point drop, an 80-point drop? Also, are you doing other things that might flag you as high risk? For example, do you have high credit card balances? A lot of people forget that you got about 100, 120 points sitting in that category where it comes to your usage on credit cards. What I mean by that is, let me give you an example I used to see it all the time when I do consultations with people. They had one or two secured, let's just use one secured card because this is pretty common. They got one secured credit card. It's the only card they've got. It's got a $300 limit, and they went out to a restaurant with their spouse and they put a $290 balance on that card, and they didn't pay it off before the end of the statement date. So that $290 balance gets reported to the bureaus. Now that card is 90+% utilized, and the credit score tanks, sometimes by 100 points. sometimes a little bit more. Depends on what else is on the card. So if you have late payments on your credit report, even if it's from 2020, 2019, okay, they're starting to mature a little bit, so they're impacting you less. But do you have high credit card balances on your open accounts? That's high risk. You combine that, because high credit card balances, what that tells creditors statistically, what it tells Vantage Score and FICO also, is that high limits on credit cards is an indication of a high probability of default, late payments. So that might be why they're dropping your score. So there's a few moving parts in that, Karita. So let me know what we're talking about as far as a score drop goes. If it's 20, 30, 40 points that are down, hey, that's pretty normal. And just let time heal that, and you'll recover that. Okay, Keith, is it easy to delete an account if you are a co-applicant and was not aware? Two things. There's really no such thing as hard or easy. No account's easy to delete or hard to delete. The question is the account in compliance with the law? Meaning, is it reporting accurately? Can they verify it? That's what everything hinges on when you do a dispute. If you are a co-applicant, Keith, just a little bit of tough love, my friend. It's your account. It doesn't matter if you were aware of it or not. Sometimes I see a lot of this when parents co-sign for their kids for like auto loans or student loans, and they don't find out till 6 months after no payment that their kid wasn't paying the debt. Listen, it happens. There's not a lot of sympathy there from the credit bureaus or the lender or the scoring models. If you're going to dispute that, I wouldn't use that as a reason, because they're going to say, dude, you signed on the dotted line. You're responsible for this account. You might do a late payment dispute. Credit Versio will generate that for you, and keep your fingers crossed they've archived the data, or they don't have the ability to access it, or they don't have the interest in responding to the dispute. So yes, it's possible. Not easy or hard. Is it in compliance or not, and is the data furnisher able and willing to respond to the dispute? Okay. Mary Gonzalez, just did my first round of dispute letters, but I've had a lot of success, digital and phone calls. Why do you think paper is better? So, Marty, paper is better for a couple of reasons. One is that's what the law is written for. The Fair Credit Reporting Act was written in 1970. And at the time, paper was the standard. The reason why, now when people ask me paper versus online, that's usually the debate. The problem with online a lot of times, and this is the reason why we've got our partners and friends who come on here with me sometimes and answer questions. One of them is from Equifax, and the other one is from Smart Credit. Both of them have worked in dispute processing, and both of them say the same thing: don't do an online dispute, because you got to read that fine print down there. You don't know what you're waiving, and sometimes the convenience of doing an online dispute really isn't worth it, because they can restrict you in what you're able to do. Also, and this is going to be my number one reason, Marty, the reason why paper disputes are better, because the thing that motivates compliance, accounts being deleted or verified, is the threat of legal action. Okay, about 13,000 lawsuits are filed every year against the credit bureaus, and it has to do with the information that data furnishers are providing. And normally when there's a lawsuit, they're suing the data furnisher and the bureau at the same time. So there's almost always two defendants, or there could be four defendants if you got a data furnisher or creditor and three credit bureaus. Because that's a possibility, and because all of the risk mitigation factors that bureaus and creditors use have to do with or have lawsuits in mind, what's the worst thing that you can have as a consumer when you show up to a lawsuit? Paper trail. And you don't have that kind of a paper trail when you do online disputes or a phone dispute. So if you ever have to contact an attorney, and it happens, okay, it does happen, they're going to say, hey, Marty, show me the dispute history on this. Well, I called them over the phone. All right, well, they're not going to subpoena the phone records, or if it's a big enough case, they might. But if you roll in there with your attorney, you're like, hey, here's all the disputes that I've done. here are the credit reports, here are the responses. That makes it so much easier for the attorney. So that answers your question there, hopefully. If not, then let me know. Okay. Rick, hope so, because I like Credit Versio. Very good. Me and my wife are both giving Credit Versio a shot. Very good. Here's the big advantage, Marty. And this is something that I've been trying to get into in this call, but it's been more important to answer questions, of course. What Credit Versio is going to do that you can't do, that I can't do, even as a credit expert, I can't do this. Credit Versio can scan your credit report, compare every account to all 3 bureaus and all previous reports, looking for the most minute change that can violate the law. Credit Versio can find 20 different errors on a credit report. Okay, a processor, a great credit expert like myself, I might be able to find 6, maybe 7, but it gets more complicated the bigger that credit report becomes. And if I got like a 9-page, 10, 15-page credit report, I'm like, well, is this a duplicate account? Did I see it up on page 2? Is it down here again on page 20? And what happened to last month? So the advantage that you have is the AI is doing a better job a greater job than any individual could possibly do. So it's going to give you a higher probability of making a dispute that's going to matter. So I'm glad you're giving it a shot. Judy, dang, I'm late again. Judy, one of these days you'll be here on time. It's okay. I'm glad you're here. All right, Keith, got it. Thanks. Rick, Identity IQ just double charged me, and I can't afford that. Smart Credit may be the better option for me. I have to try them. Maybe they won't rob me. Yeah, I'm not sure. Identity IQ is pretty, Rick, most monitoring services are really straight up and pretty easy to use. If they double charge you, call them. They've got their phone number and all the receipts that they've given you, and see if you can get a refund. The only time I hear about double charge, there's 2 occasions when I hear about double charging. And it's not really a double charge. What happens is all 3 bureau monitoring services are subscription based, meaning they're going to charge you every single month until you close them. That's their business model. And they let everybody know up front that's the way they operate. If your billing date comes, let's just say it's the 15th of the month, just making up a date, and they can't charge your card, they're going to try a couple of times. Maybe there's no funds, maybe the card number change, who knows? And they try it a couple of times and it doesn't work. Well, they might wait till the next month, and maybe they might charge you on the 5th of next month. So they get that payment, and then 10 days later on the 15th on your normal billing date, they're going to charge you again. So it might look like a double charge, but really what happens is you're behind for for the credit card to not be able to process. Now, I'm not saying that's the situation with you. Maybe another credit report was ordered. It doesn't happen with Credit Versio because Credit Versio doesn't make that pull. But give them a call. Find out what they have to say. Okay, let's see. Randy, welcome. I've been noticing for the past 3 months, my score drops 20 points. Then a week later, it rises 40 points. Randy, I was just talking about score migration. This is exactly what happens here. When it drops like that, is that an indication that I'm expecting a big increase? So Randy, the scores, let me back up a little bit. Credit reports and credit scores are totally separate things. A credit score is not really part of your credit report. It's an ancillary item. It's an accessory. It's like if you buy a car and you decide to get leather interior. Well, the car comes the way that it comes, but you can add leather interior to it. That's how credit reports and scores work. So when your credit score comes in, at that moment, whether it's Vantage Score or FICO, is going to score your credit report. That score is good for that moment in time only, and then it's irrelevant. If your credit report changes the next day or 2 days later, your score could be different. Data on your credit report is always changing, even if you do nothing. Let's just say your credit card balances didn't move at all, which is very rare for most people. And at the very least, the next month, your credit report is a month older. So age of your accounts is 15% of your credit score. So you might have movement up just because all your accounts got a month older. It also depends on what scorecard you're in. There's dozens of scorecards for Vantage and FICO score. That scorecard is like a bucket that you're in that determines what your score is going to be based on items on your credit report. So there are a lot of variables. Normal score migration, like I was saying maybe about 10, 15 minutes ago, is about 25 to 30 points or so up and down every single month. It's nothing to be alarmed about. It doesn't indicate anything. If your score drops 20 points and went up 40 points, there's probably a reason for that, but that reason can be buried in dozens and dozens and dozens of variables. So I wouldn't worry about it. When you start seeing movement in score, like a downward movement of 80, 90 points, that's something to be concerned about. And that's going to have a very noticeable material explanation on your credit report. You could probably look at it and figure out what it is. Okay, hope that answers your question, Randy. Cornelia, I signed up on 9/9, mailed in my letters. Can't wait to see the results. Congratulations. You know, that's 90% of the work, really, is clicking a couple of buttons, let Credit Versio do the work for you, and drop the letters in the mail. I know it's old school. Trust me. I know that putting letters in the mail is old school, but that's the way this stuff works. Like I said earlier, the Fair Credit Reporting Act was written in 1970. That's the year I was born. That's 51 years ago this thing was written. There was no internet back then. Okay, mail, paper. That's what all this was designed for. And as crazy as it sounds, that's still the standard today. Okay. Rick, great call. Identity IQ. Randy, you are very welcome. Okay, let's see if I can get into this next section. Here's what I want to explain to you that is brand new with Credit Versio. In fact, if you've done disputes in the last week and a half, you've probably seen this. So I'm going to do a little PowerPoint. Not going to be there for very long. In your credit items page, what you're going to see is, this is a little bit blurry, just bear with me. You're going to see the suggested reason. Let me zoom in a little bit right there. It's circled. So this is your suggested reason. So when you open up, okay, there's the zoom in. When you open up your credit items, when you're going to select the accounts to do a dispute, what you're going to see now is a suggested reason. What this means, and I'm addressing the information in blue. It says suggested. If you look to the right, it says payment status error. What's happened here is Credit Versio software read this credit report, understands what violations are, and found one. And let me explain. And by the way, it can find 20 different errors. And this is really important. So let me show you what I mean here. Let's read to the right of the blue. So you see it says round one dispute, suggested reason. Now we're in this red box at the bottom. Suggested reason is payment status error. Look to the right. It says the current payment this is the dispute right here. This is what's going to be on the dispute letter to the creditor. It says the current payment status of 90 days delinquent is incorrect because the balance due on this account is 0. Okay, let me explain to you how amazing and how important this is. And this is just one example, by the way. What's happening, you see the red arrow? The red arrow is pointing at the payment status. This is the current payment status of the account that FICO and Vantage Score are going to read. That's a problem. This account is technically closed. So if you look under where it says utility company, WI Electric, look down, you'll see it says account, but I blocked out the account number in black. Below that it says status. Status is closed. Okay, the status of this account is closed and the balance is 0, so no money is due. The account is closed and it's telling FICO and Vantage and being reported on this, I think this is TransUnion, that the account is currently 90 days late. That's a score killer. That's telling FICO and Vantage Score that this person is currently in default. Let me go on to the next page here. Okay, 0 balance. Look at the little arrows right there. 0 balance, yet it's showing 0 money past due and 90 days delinquent. So if I were 90, let's say my car payment on my car is $500. If I was 90 days late, my past due balance would be $1,500. This is showing 90 days late and zero past due. Now look at the arrows that are pointing down. You see where it says on days late, it says 61. That means it was 60 days late once and 90 days late twice. Okay, that's all it's supposed to be reporting. That's the history of the late payment. You know what? For all I know, that 60-day late and those two 90-day lates could have been 2 years ago. And if those were 2 years ago, the impact, the negative impact on the score would be greatly reduced because of its age, just by virtue of its age. But because this is reported incorrectly, and by the way, a lot of people wouldn't catch this because they look at that and say 90 days delinquent. Okay, I was 90 days delinquent, but they don't understand that this section right here, you see that arrow that's pointing to the right, that big arrow, it says payment status. That is the current status of that account. That's bad news. Okay, so Credit Versio caught that. That's why software is so much better at doing this stuff than a human being. Now, a credit expert would have caught that if they were paying attention, and if they weren't, thinking about what they're going to do after work, happy hour, or arguing with their boyfriend or girlfriend. They should catch it, but you can't bank on it. That's the great thing about software. It doesn't miss anything and it doesn't make mistakes. Okay, Marty, question here. Okay, so what will happen if you send a paperwork and do a digital dispute at the same time? Probably nothing. There's no reason to do that. All that the bureaus are going to think is that they just got a double dispute in two different formats. I wouldn't do it again. Just stick with paper. There's no reason to do an online dispute. There's no advantage to an online dispute over a printed dispute. So trust me, I've over my first 7.5 years in credit repair, working for a white glove, hands-on, high-end credit repair company, I've talked to literally hundreds and hundreds of people who hired us, and they told me, like, hey, I just did an online dispute. Is that going to affect anything? The answer is no. It's not going to affect anything. Okay. One more thing I want to show you. Among the accounts or errors that Credit Versio can find, it can find things like duplicate accounts, wrong balances. It looks for discrepancies between accounts. Remember, everything on your credit report has to be reporting accurately, and it has to be verifiable. When you have discrepancies between bureaus, or if something changed from this month's credit bureau to last month's credit bureau, like maybe an account was re-aged, then that's a problem. That can drop your credit score. These are things that Credit Versio takes into account. It can scan thousands and thousands of lines of code within a matter of a second, and it understands what it's looking for. I want to give you an example. This just happened recently with a client. I want to show you, let's see, where is it? Here it is. This is an example of a resold collection. Okay, so here's what happened. Here's the story. About 2 or 3 months ago, this client disputed a whole bunch of stuff on their credit report. One of the things happened to be a collection. Now, the collection was deleted. But what happened is the collection company that owned the debt, I believe it's from AT&T, we'll see here in a second, eventually sold that debt to another collection company. And it showed up 3 months later, I think it was. So what Credit Versio did is when it scanned that whole credit report, it looked at that collection, and it does this with every account. It looks back in time. Now, she'd been with us for several months, so Credit Versio looked back on the previous report, the one before that, the one before that, and said, I found it. Here is a collection. The original creditor was AT&T, I believe it was. It was deleted, and there's enough data in that account, because remember, it's looking at digital data. It's not really seeing exactly the same thing that you and I see. So it found data points on that collection and realized that that collection was sold, purchased by another collection company, and then put back on the credit report. So I want to show you how Credit Versio handles that. This is one of my favorite parts. Okay. So look down here. Suggested reason. Now we're looking in the blue. You'll see the Credit Versio logo. It says suggested to the right. Suggested reason. What that means is Credit Versio is telling us what it found. What is the dispute reason it's going to use? Check this out. It says this debt. Now we're talking about this. What is this? Credit Resource Management. Since this debt was previously being reported by Franklin Collection SV. That was the name of the previous collection company. I disputed this debt to the credit bureaus, and the account was deleted because the information was inaccurate. You can assume that when something is deleted, it's unverifiable or it's inaccurate. It doesn't matter if you say inaccurate or unverifiable. Okay? A new debt collector, in this case, Credence Resources, is now reporting this very same debt, but the disputed information has still never been verified. Please delete this account immediately. And it was. Essentially, what happened is an account that could not be verified, could not comply with the FDCPA, was bought by another collection company. How are they going to verify it? Well, they couldn't, and that account was deleted. But think about how complex that would have been to look at that and find data points, some of them that you and I couldn't even see, and then go back multiple credit reports and go, boom, there it is. Already disputed this. All right, very good. Well, I hope you're as impressed with this as I am, because that is a technological marvel. Okay, Debbie, I have a closed repo from 2017. Ally recently deleted all my payment history and then changed the account from closed to open. I've used round 3 of your letters, and that's when they changed. Let me go through here. Changed it to this. My score dropped 94 points when I disputed it. Ally still owns the debt. I've called y'all back about this. Please help. Let me just read this through one more time. Closed repo from 2017. Ally recently deleted all my payment history. Payment history on a repo. So Debbie, a repo is a charge-off. You can call it a repo, but it's still a charged-off account. Your payment history on the account is completely irrelevant because it's what's called an 09 account, meaning it's total default. So the only thing that matters on the account is the payment status, which is called charge-off collection. Okay, so all my payment history, and then charge the account from closed to open. That's a problem. Okay, now if you have a charged off account and they opened it back up, that's something you probably want to talk to an attorney about. So I've used round 3 of your letters, and that's when they changed it to this. My score dropped 94 points. Yeah, so essentially what they did is they reactivated the account. You'd have to look at it to see, are they in a collection process? Because sometimes companies have their own internal collection company, but that should be a separate line item. So do this. You said you called us about it, but I'm not sure what the end result was. So what we can do is take a look at it. But if Ally changed it from a closed to an open account, that's a problem. It's making it look like it's a brand new account. So I'd actually have to see what it's reporting. So why don't you do this, Debbie? Send me a screenshot of this at davidm@creditversio.com. I'll take a look at it for you. You could probably just look into your account if you give me permission to. I could probably find it. Okay. But that would be very unusual for a closed repo to be reopened again. In fact, it's not too wild. I'll tell you a real quick story. Years and years ago, I had a closed account with who was it? Ocwen. So it was a second mortgage on a house that was foreclosed. This is going back to the Great Recession, where a lot of people got foreclosures. I was among them. And that Ocwen account, which was closed, charged off, closed for many, many years, suddenly opened back up again. And not only did it open back up, but they put 120-day lates all the way across. And it killed my score, 100 points or more. And I disputed it. Ocwen was not good at the time responding to disputes. And I ended up working with an attorney friend of mine. And we ended up doing a meeting in a courtroom, and they ended up writing me a check. So these things do happen. Mistakes happen, so don't freak out about it. I'll take a look at it, and then if this is one of those situations where maybe you might need some legal help, I can send a name your way. Okay. Email a screenshots. Several months reporting showing it closed for years and it opened in July. Yeah, big problem. I'll take a look at it, then we'll get you the help that you need. Okay, so where are we? Wow, we're 57 minutes. Okay, I see that we're coming down to the end of our time. Thank you so much for joining me today. Great questions. I really appreciate them. Love it when I'm getting good, thoughtful questions. I'm glad to see that you're here to learn how to improve your credit. And for those who watch this on the replay, because this will post up on Facebook and YouTube, I comb through these I get alerts every time a question is asked. So don't be shy. If you got a question about this material, feel free to post it in the underneath this video here, and I will get to it. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you next Wednesday. Next time I will have my guest John Olsheimer with me, formerly with FICO and Equifax, and we have a great time answering everybody's question. Look forward to seeing you then. Take care and have a nice night.